Hi everybody, welcome back to class. We are starting Module 3 of our time together, and in this week you'll be turning in the final draft of writing project number 1. There is an additional discussion board where you will get peer reviews on your first draft, and we want to do everything we can to make this as good as possible. You'll be turning in your final draft on Sunday, February 2nd, before 11:59 p.m. Now, I want to explain, because this is the first time that we've worked together on a writing project, what you're going to get from me. You already know that you're going to post a copy of your paper in the discussion board and people will comment on it, but you also get comments from me on your writing projects as they go. So what I did is I pulled up a paper from a previous class. It's not from anyone that's in our current class. And I want to show you what that looks like, just so you understand. Now, I will read everything that you send in for a draft and for the final version, but you only get comments on the draft. I don't make too many comments on the final version because those are spoken for in the grade and the rubric that you receive. I read your draft once it's into the grade book. I download it, I make comments on it, and then I email it back to you. And you'll notice when you go into the grade book, you'll simply see a comment from me showing that I've looked at it that said, "My comments have been emailed to you." Here's what they look like. I do this in the review function of Word. And it's important that when you receive that email from me that you have to download the file. You simply can't click open, because if you just click open, my comments might not show up. So download the file, do a save as, and then open it. And what you should see looks like this. I'll put a little comment in here on the side that says, "This item needs attention." I try to compliment people if I think you did something well. I apologize if I don't always do that, because there's a lot of these to go through. But if you follow what I've included here, I think it'll strengthen your paper. Now, I will say this about ownership. What you're writing is your own work. And if I make a suggestion to you, but you disagree with me and you think, "No, I did it right the first time, that's how I meant for it to read," then that's fine. You're not obligated to agree with me. It's your work after all, not mine. I'm giving you suggestions, I'm not giving you commands. So that's what this should look like. If you download the paper and you don't see my comments, go ahead and hit me up on text, 812-498-4200. We'll try and figure out what went wrong. Now, two things I want to point out on the drafts that I have read so far, and I've read several of them. I haven't read them all, but I will be reading them in a very short period of time, so everyone has feedback in the maximum time to improve your draft. When you are discussing the person who wrote the essay that you are referencing, the first time you mention them, use their first and last name. After that point, it is acceptable, in fact it's preferable, that you refer to them by last name only. You don't need to use the first and last name, and you would never use their first name only. That's too casual, and that's not proper academic writing. The second thing I want to point out, and this is common, it's not just the folks in this class, is inserting a citation into your essay. In fact, this person, again, a previous student, made this same mistake. Think of it this way: when you're quoting somebody and you're pulling some information from another source and you want to include it because it helps emphasize your point, the citation is part of the sentence. And punctuation always goes at the end of the sentence. So you would never do as this person did. They include the word careful, then an ellipsis, and then the end of the quotation mark. The student didn't do it, but you would never put the period or the exclamation mark or the question mark here, because the citation is part of the sentence, and as I pointed out to this student, the period goes after the parenthesis. Now, this has been a problem for as long as I've been here at Ivy Tech, and it probably will continue to be a problem. It's no fault of your own. It's just something that I don't think is properly reinforced in high school and whatever education you had before you got here. But that is the proper way to do it. It's a common problem, which is fine. Our goal here is to make sure that when you leave this class and you continue to write academic essays, that you know that rule. Refer to the author by their last name only after you introduce them, and you always put the punctuation at the end. So let's get out of this and back into our class and take a look at our module. I know I say this every time. I try to keep these as short as possible because I don't want to take too much of your time, but I also want to be thorough at the same time. So as I mentioned, we are in Module 3. Again, here are the instructions for the summary and response, and note it includes both words summary and response. Your final essay should give me, the reader, or anyone else a good idea of what this writer was trying to say. What is their message? How do they make their point? And then last, respond to it. It has to include both elements, what they said and what you think about it. We're going to get into more complex writing projects, which will give you the opportunity to make more arguments and express more opinion. But for now, summarize and respond. There's a little information on the principles of peer response, which I think everyone in this class is pretty good with. This is where you will go in and post a copy of what you've written, your final draft, or your half draft if you haven't done it already, so other people in the class can comment. And I mentioned this last time, if you see that someone doesn't have any comments, go ahead and gravitate towards that rather than having one person get 3 responses and someone else none. Supplemental resources, I'm not going to open this. I know you will. Make sure you read through it. And this, when you are prepared, is where you will post your final draft, and this is the one that will be graded. Notice that it's worth 100 points. As I've mentioned before, we start off with a fairly low point total, so you get acclimated and get your feet wet and understanding how I look at things and how this course works, and will progressively get a little more challenging as time goes on. Here's my other suggestion. Of course, you're going to get feedback from me. You're going to get feedback in the peer review discussion board, but also consider doing this, especially if maybe you think English and writing is not your strongest subject. It's very difficult to find your own mistakes in something you've written. It has to do with how our brain works. We simply do not visualize our own mistakes, but you know who does? An independent third party. So feel free to take something that you've written before you turn it in. Give it to a friend, give it to a coworker, give it to your math instructor, who knows. They will be able to see with fresh eyes things that you are incapable of seeing, because we tend to write the way we think and we simply don't see our own errors. That's number 1. Number 2, Word in Microsoft Word is incredibly powerful and has a lot of great tools. Absolutely, before you turn anything in, use spell and grammar check. I did see not many, but a few obvious misspellings in the drafts, and I don't really take off any points for that because I understand this is a draft. It's supposed to be a little sloppy, a little messy, but when it comes to the final version, there shouldn't be a single misspelled word in there. There shouldn't be a single run-on sentence or a fragment. And by using an independent third person who will review your work for you, and by using spell and grammar check in Word, you shouldn't have any of those mistakes. When we get to our final writing project, it's more about how do you craft an argument. This one is about following form and function. And let's try and make sure that we get the little things right off the bat. And a lot of those have to do with getting a clean copy, following the instructions, making sure that you hit on all the points, that you have both a summary and a response, and that there are no technical errors. The discussion board for this week you need to post by the 29th, so that's Wednesday. This is being recorded on the 27th. And then you need to have your final version and your discussion board participation turned in by no later than 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, February 2nd. Now, as I've mentioned, I try to keep these short. I know I don't cover anything, and if I didn't cover something that interests you or that you have a question about, hit me up on text. That number again is 812-498-4200. I try to answer messages as quickly as they come in, and it's the best way to stay in touch with me. That's all I've got for this week. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.